Do you worry about radicalized Islamic terrorists here in Florida? A lot of people do, especially following the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando and seemingly constant news of attacks in Europe and Asia. My guest today has taken that concern a step further. Roger Gangitano, most to all of us. Do you worry about radicalized Islamic terrorists here in Florida? A lot of people do, especially following the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando and seemingly constant news of attacks in Europe and Asia. My guest today has taken that concern a step further. Roger Gangitano leads the Space Coast chapter of Act for America, a group that has committed itself to resisting radical Islam. In Brevard, Act for America has made news by getting permission to carry firearms to meetings at the county commission chambers and by protesting a high school history textbook for an alleged pro-Islamic bias. Gangitano himself was at the scene of a Draw Muhammad cartoon contest in Garland, Texas, where a pair of ISIS-related gunmen opened fire, and he's objected to my interviews with a local imam on Muslim relations. Critics have called Act for America anti-Muslim. Some have even accused it of being a hate group. I decided it was time to learn more and get Mr. Gangitano, its local leader, on the record. Watch. Roger, thank you for joining me here in the Florida Today newsroom. Let's talk a little bit about Act for America. That's the group that meets at the County Commission building in Viera, and you've been involved with for a long time. Tell me a little bit about that group and its mission.
It's a grassroots organization that fights against the radical elements of Islam, radical terrorism, if you will. We support Israel. We're an organization that tries to educate the public and motivate them to stand on the side of defense of America and defend against threats to our way of life, whether they be domestic or foreign, and that's what we do.
And how many members do you have?
My chapter, we have about 900 members. Act for America has about 1,000 chapters across the country with 300,000 members. Quite effective. They've worked tirelessly to have American laws for American courts passed. We were effective after a 4-year fight here in Florida. Certainly not our effort alone, but we were instrumental in assisting to get that law passed here in Florida. So that worked very well. My chapter is involved in that directly.
I was going to ask you, how you talked about fighting radical Islam, terrorism, those kinds of things. How do you actually fight? You're not a paramilitary group. I mean,
no. But we, between the two organizations that I work with, the United West has been said to have a military-grade activism that we utilize. We will physically go inside of Muslim events. We will attend their events. I attended the ISNA 2012 conference. We go right inside their events, so we often will be thrown out. They don't want us there. So their public events, we've purchased tickets and gone to their events, and when we get there, they turn around and they say, "We're not letting you in. We'll refund your money." They just don't want you there. Last night, there was an event in Boca Raton on Islamophobia, a follow-up event, and 3 Muslims were supposed to be representing the Islamic point of view on this subject, and all 3 came up with emergencies that they were unable to attend. That's not a believable story that any one of them gave. They could have sent a substitute if one person couldn't make it, but they chose not to. So, but we go right inside their events, and we educate ourselves. We learn what they're saying, and we try to expose any erroneous or misleading issues that they present.
So you argue back when they're saying something that you disagree with?
Well, if they allow open commentary, yes. Very often they don't do that. They present their point of view, and the way that they control what can be asked is that they tell you that you have to submit your questions through an email or a text message, and then they select the questions that they want to answer. It allows them to control what gets said and what doesn't get said. Free speech is not something that's really promoted in that environment, which is what we fight against.
You mentioned an act that was passed, signed here in Florida, the American law and American courts. What does that mean?
It is a law that's been passed. We had a fight for that law for over 4 years. When I say we, meaning Americans. It's been passed in a number of states. I think 17. Please don't quote me on that. I don't know the exact number. Basically, what it says is that in our courts, we will use American laws in American courts, and no foreign codes that would. The only time a foreign code can be used is if it does not conflict with American law. It might not seem as if we have to pass a law like that, but we did.
In other words, a judge shouldn't be reaching out to some sort of Europe law, Sharia law, any other type of code to try to reason his way through a case and make sense of something that's before him.
He can do that as long as that law does not conflict with our constitutional law, be it federal or state. Okay, as long as it does not conflict, then the law can be used. If two people enter into an agreement, they can make any agreement, terms to that agreement that they choose, and that's fine. But you cannot make a contract with someone that says, I give you permission to kill me, because I can't give you permission to murder anyone.
I see.
All right, so they cannot make a law, and in this context, let's use the word Sharia. The law was not specifically intent to stop Sharia. Certainly it was one of the concerns, but Islam, Sharia, is never mentioned in the law. It prevents all laws.
Sure, because Jews, Mormons, others, they may want to enter into a contract in which they try to live up to the standards of their religion. It would be awfully hard to pick on.
That's correct.
Islam or Muslim principles without also legally affecting those other ones.
That's correct.
Let's talk about something that came up. Your group was in the news. You lobbied the county commission out of concerns for the safety of your membership to allow concealed carry on the premises. A number of your members have concealed carry permits, something that I'm absolutely fine with. Government buildings were one that, or the county commission meetings were places that they weren't allowed unless the county commission allowed it. You lobbied to let them do that. Why? Explain.
Well, actually, the instigating fact, was Garland, Texas, where I was out in Garland, Texas, helping to live stream the Pamela Geller Draw Muhammad art contest and exhibition. So I was there working that event when the terrorists came and attacked.
Two gunmen, opened fire, police were there.
It was two Islamic terrorists. They were determined to be directly ISIS related. It was the first ISIS attack here in the United States. All right. The fact that nobody on our side was killed was simply a matter that they messed up their timing. They showed up exactly when all of the people were supposed to be coming out. But our event got started 20 minutes late, so it ended late. And when they showed up, they were expecting hordes of people to be coming out. And the police would be paying attention to all of the people. Well, in fact, with none of the people coming out, the police were paying better attention to the parking lot. They spotted these guys, the tip of the rifle or whatever tripped them up. Okay, the cops spotted them. They knew they'd been had. They jumped out of the car, started firing, and the Garland police, give them all of the credit in the world. They were phenomenal, and one Garland police officer pulled a service weapon and dropped and killed both of the terrorists. But there could have been an awful lot of people killed at that event had we finished on time. So that raised a concern here in Melbourne because I got a lot of coverage, both out of state and here. Your paper covered it. I was interviewed by you and TV stations, et cetera. And it was said what I do, the chapter that I run, approximately how many people are in my chapter and attend my meetings, when the meetings are, where the meetings are, and suddenly security was much more of a concern than it ever was.
Sure.
When I looked at the state statute for those people who have concealed weapon permits, it says that you can't carry, among other places, you can't carry to a county commissioner's meeting. Well, my meetings are held in the county commissioner's meeting room. It's not a county commissioner's meeting. The county policy stated that you could not carry in the county commissioner's room or anywhere on the facility.
Could you get armed security? Could
they
provide?
No, cannot, believe it or not, because the county does not have a contract for that. They have a contract only for unarmed security. The only way that I can have armed security there is to physically pay the sheriff's department to send deputies. And unless you're going to write us a check, Matt, we really can't afford. We function on a shoestring. So that's $100 or $150 a pop, okay, plus the rental of the room and everything. We just we don't have a large budget, so there had to be a different solution. And when I looked at it, I simply said, why should the county policy be more restrictive than the state statute? And I brought that to the county commissioners, and they agreed that they would amend the county policy to be no more restrictive than the state statute on the on concealed weapon. So now you can carry a concealed weapon onto government property, including the county commissioner's meeting room, so long as there is no county commissioner's meeting going on. All right, and my meeting is certainly not a county commissioner's meeting. So it was very effective. It went 5-0. I was really surprised to get a unanimous vote on that to pass it. And they passed it, but it was the right thing to do.
Will you be having any Draw Muhammad contests in Vieira?
I've really never thought about that. I would never want to step on Pamela Geller's toes.
Okay.
Okay, because she wears high heels, and if she kicked me, that would hurt.
Well, I mean that shooting in Garland, just to put things on the timeline, came right after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and no one, I mean. Here were journalists
it was months later
murdered for their, what we would consider to be free speech and political satire of religion, something that was important to them. Why have a Draw Muhammad cartoon contest if you knew that it would be picking that kind of a conflict potentially?
Okay, first off, you do what you want to do, free speech in this country, without regard to the repercussions. I'm not going to do it because somebody else isn't going to like it. That's free speech. Okay, doesn't take that into account. Free speech is exactly what Pamela Geller's art contest was all about. Okay, the Charlie Hebdo attack happened, and then I think it was 10 or 17 days later in Garland, Texas, there was another event that was put together at the Caldwell Center, and the Muslims had an event entitled Stand with the Prophet. So there was world outcry against the killings at Charlie Hebdo, and everyone saying, Islam cannot demand the killing of people because they drew a picture. And the event in Garland, Texas that the Muslims put together is Stand with the Prophet.
Right.
Okay, that was so Pamela Geller turned around and said, enough is enough. We have to have a freedom of speech thing here. And that's why Pamela Geller put the art contest together in the same facility, the Caldwell Center. And that's what it was about. And the proof of the pudding is that if you take a look at the winning artwork, the winning artwork is clearly an expression of free speech, had nothing to do with Charlie Hebdo or anything. And the winning artwork was an artist's hand drawing a picture of Muhammad, okay, and Muhammad holding a sword over his head with an angry look on his face. Excellent drawing, okay, but not a vicious thing, just an angry look, and Muhammad with a bubble saying, "You can't draw me." Mm-hmm. And the artist's bubble says, "That's why I draw you." So that's an expression of free speech. That winning artwork had to be decided days before. They had a big check made up for him for $10,000. Okay, so there was a lot that was done in preparation by choosing that winning artwork to express the freedom of speech concept.
Sure.
And that was done long before the attack itself. So it wasn't done later to say we're going to switch it and make it seem like
Sure.
It didn't work that way. Okay, it's an expression of free speech, and I would love for Pamela Geller to do it again. And I have no intention here in Brevard County of holding such an event. Not that I disagree with it at all. I just have no intention of doing that at this time. It's a good idea.
Is ACT a hate group?
No, absolutely not. Okay, they're a grassroots, politically patriotic group that we're concerned about those threats to America that we face. That's it. The bad guys like to label us as a hate group. The people that label us as hate groups are themselves, if you just look into them, hate groups themselves. The Southern Poverty Law Center are the people that have this hate group list. We don't have a hate group list. So if you create a hate group list, you're focused on that subject. We're not focused on hate at all. Okay, I oppose that completely. So no, we're not a hate group. We don't hate anybody. I hate people that want to kill me. I'm funny like that. You know, if you want to kill me, I probably am not going to like you too much. All right, but
I think it's the narrow focus on radical Islam. And to be clear, nobody likes radical Islam, especially not extreme violent radical Islam. And I think even a lot of Muslims who consider themselves moderates are coming out now, probably a little slower than some of us would have liked to have seen them do, and really denouncing that. But it is that narrow focus, and I think that's probably what has some people say, well, maybe they're just anti-Islam.
Yeah, I would answer that this way, and you know me to be, I try to be really polite and everything, and I don't want to sound argumentative, but if you want to address the issue of drunk drivers, you don't focus and turn everybody's attention to the drivers that aren't drunk. Okay, we don't subdivide it up and turn around and say, these drunk drivers are drunk on beer, these guys are drunk on vodka. It really doesn't matter. Driving under the influence of alcohol is driving under the influence of alcohol. It doesn't matter that it's a small percentage or what percentage it is. It's the number of drunk drivers we're concerned with. So those people who focus on eliminating drunk drivers, like the organization MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, okay, does anybody turn around and tell them that they're a hate group, that they hate drivers? All drivers? The argument is a false argument, and it's not fair. Okay, the narrow focus is so that we don't include all Muslims in the attack. And some of the numbers that are cited, and they were cited on your show, not by you, but on your guest in January, and I don't want to mention his name because I like the man and I respect him, because he speaks intelligently to me and without hate, and I don't speak with hate to him. But the argument is that less than 1% of the Muslims are radical Muslims. Well, that gets blown right out of the water because they on your show, everyone, both yourself and him, cited Pew Research. Well, Pew Research, if I can dump some numbers out really fast because I got them sort of memorized, okay, says that Muslims now represent a solid 1.1% of the population. Let's call it 1%.
Yeah, I have the numbers here, and these are the. In fact, right when I did that interview or publicized it, Pew is in the process of revising upward its population of Muslims in America.
Yep.
And what they said was that 86% of Muslims in the United States said suicide bombings or other violence are never justified in the defense of Islam. That's good. Mm-hmm. But 7% said violence is sometimes justified, and 1% said it is often justified.
Yep.
If you take 8% of that total population of Muslims that they talked about today, it's about 264,000 people. And I asked, it was Muzaffar Sheikh, a local imam.
You said 144,000 on the show.
Right, but that was based on an older population figure. The figure is growing.
Yep, absolutely.
He said he was appalled at that small number, that small percentage, which was still a large number, is worrisome, he said. He said it's the moderate Muslims who must start talking. I think there is a realization on the part of moderate Muslims that they cannot be hijacked anymore by these extremists in the United States, Europe, or any place. Okay. You disagree with that or agree with that?
No, I don't disagree with his statement. I disagree with the concept that we will minimize the threat by underestimating the numbers, which was done on the show that day. The number that was come up with, whether by error or intent, is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the number was erroneous. It was incorrect. It's 144,000 is what you said. The number actually comes up to in excess of 258,000, or what did you just say, 200?
I think if you use the latest figure that it was 264,000.
Okay, that's close enough. I came up with 258.6, but I didn't probably use the third decimal point, okay, and calculate it in. Okay, 258,
and again,
264.
to be clear, though, I mean, those are, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, but that's a whole universe of people who sympathize, and what the CIA and others say is that within that subset, if they're going to stop terrorism, they got to focus on the ones who seem likely to become actually violent extremists.
Well, there's more violent extremists than just the ones who believe that suicide bombing is effective. Those are just the ones who believe in that particular process. The ones that want to cut off your hand for thievery, okay, adds to that number, as does the ones that want female genital mutilization, as do the ones that justify honor killings, as do the ones that want to kill homosexuals. All of those people add to the 264,000. So you can arguably turn around and say that the number is between 1/2 and 3/4 of a million by the time you include these larger groups. So the number is not less than 1% of Muslims, as was presented on your show, okay, that day. And I'm not blaming your show, Matt, but it's a public forum, and this is the presentation that is given publicly regularly. It's such a small percentage of the Muslims that are radical. It's not the percentage, it's the number. You got 500,000 people walking around in this country that want to do you harm one way or another. Whether they want to kill me with a knife or a bullet, doesn't matter. They want me dead. So if you take the total number, it's a great concern. And yes, my attention and what I do as an activist is to focus on those things that are a factual threat to our existence and our lives and our way of life. So yes, I do focus on that. But that's just one thing that was said. If I can point another one out just to make my point, okay? Your guest had said, if there's a school shooting and children are shot, it's a tragic thing, okay? It's a terrible thing. He says, but it's reported as a crime. But if a Muslim does it, it's reported as terrorists, as a terrorist act. Well, your guest has been in this country since 1970. So I went back through the records, okay, and I pulled all of the records. Do you know how many school shootings have actually been blamed on Muslims since 1970?
No.
Zero. So to use that analogy, it's a false narrative entirely. No Muslims have been blamed.
Well, I think this was right after San Bernardino, and I think what he was, expressing was some defensiveness. That, on one hand, they're horrified by the terrorism and they don't condone it in any way. In fact, on the show, he denounced it. On the other hand, they're afraid, and it's not an irrational fear, that all Muslims will be blamed for it because it's portrayed as terrorism, and then things tend to go that way. And the United States has a history of, hey, we were attacked by the Japanese. We round up all the Japanese and send them to internment camps. You know, Jews are afraid of being blamed for, you know, they were anarchists back in, you know, the turn of the 20th century. A lot of them came from Eastern Europe. Then Jews were blamed for that kind of stuff. So I think they're afraid of being swept up when they have a chance to actually be good. And a lot of them, as he said, have been here doing their jobs and just living life for a long time.
There's a lot of non-Muslims that walk around every day and hope that when they go to a supermarket, they're not going to become part of the meat on the shelf. Okay? The non-Muslims have fears also, and they're legitimate fears, aren't they?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid today.
So the term Islamophobia, which has been developed specifically to squash this kind of talk against radical Muslims, that's what the phrase was developed for by the International Islamic Institute of Thought back in the early, I believe it was the 70s, forgive me. But they developed that specifically to stigmatize the people that talk against radical Muslims. And it's a phobia of, when somebody calls me an Islamophobe, I don't have a mental condition that requires psychological help because I'm concerned for my safety. Okay, it's a legitimate fear. With everything that's going on, there's a legitimate fear of what radical Muslims will do. It's not all of Islam. I said it to you, and I'd like to say it on your show. Not all Italians were part of the mafia, and not all Puerto Ricans have little fuzzy balls hanging around the windshield of their '57 Chevy. And the joke there is that I say that's because some of them drive Fords. All right. But the point is that all doesn't apply at any time. Okay? All cops are not good.
I think it sounds to me like most Americans now, it's becoming mainstream thinking that we really do need to be much more aggressive about trying to figure out radicalized Islamic terrorism and finding those people who will find. In some cases, it could be these lone wolves, like the person that shot up the Pulse nightclub, who find a justification in it for their own already homicidal, terrible thoughts.
If you put enough lone wolves together, do they not constitute a pack? Okay, every one of them is being looked at.
I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that there is common ground, and I think a lot of people want to try to figure this out.
I understand that, but how do we find the common bond for the radical Muslims? And therein comes where everyone is going to say, oh, you're attacking Islam, the religion. But it's been shown that many I'm not going to give a percentage because this is something that can't be percentage and come down to a specific number. But the mosques are specifically where this hate is developed for these radical Muslims. And I'll prove it to you. It's in my bag. I'll pull it out. That's part of what my meeting was last night. All right? I'll show it to you, Matt, on private time so that we don't waste the time that we're speaking here. But I'll show you. Many of the mosques are where, in Islam, okay, it is said that the mosques are more than just a place to pray, that they are a place for their military actions to come out of. And that, of course, is the militant side of Islam, not the religious, peaceful side of Islam. So when you merge these things together and they overlap, it's very difficult to say Islam on one subject and separate it from when in fact they're merged as one. They're two different parts of Islam that constitute the whole. They're the parts that constitute the whole. So when you want to say this part is defective, they say, well, I'm not going to buy the whole car. It's only the carburetor that needs to be replaced. Well, we can't talk about the carburetor, okay, without being accused of talking about the whole car. That's what we're up against. And that's why we get so misunderstood, those of us on our side that fight radical Islam, is because it's so hard to talk about one part of Islam without being accused of attacking the other part. I don't want to spend my life reading the Quran and understanding it better that I don't understand, Islam. They don't go to school to understand Christianity. We don't have large groups of people running around murdering people under the name of Jesus Christ. You can isolate people throughout history that have killed and they are Christian, and you can associate their Christian faith or whatever faith it is to what the act that they did. But they're isolated incidents. Okay, we've lost since 2011, 2001, almost 30,000 people have died under the name of Allah, with Allah Akbar being screamed. Okay, 30,000, that's a lot of people. Look, do you want me to show it to you? No. You can look up each and every one of them. I'll show you the accent, every one of them.
This is a huge topic. We could go on. Roger, thank you for sharing your point of view today. I'm glad to have you in finally.
Thanks for having me, and I do appreciate it, man.
Well, that's our program. I thank Roger Gangitano for joining us. I'm Matt Reed. As always, you can share your opinion with me online. Look me up at facebook.com/MattReedNews or on Twitter and Instagram @MattReedWrites. Don't miss my next interview with the Brevard County newsmaker here on WEFS and FloridaToday.com.